Welcome, data people. We are Zuma. My name is Matt, and this is the Data for Good podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Zuma. Zuma is a dedicated recruitment company focusing on data positions across Berlin. The Data for Good podcast is for the world of data science, analytics, and engineering, giving you a platform to hear the thoughts and opinions of data leaders from Berlin and beyond. Today, we are joined by Nina Shah, currently Director of Engineering and Data at AMBOSS. Nina, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Matt. Nice to be here with you on the podcast. I have been an avid viewer of all your previous episodes, so I'm happy to be one of your guests now.
It's an absolute honor to have you on. So for those who aren't aware, can you give us a quick introduction?
Absolutely. So hi, everybody who's listening. My name is Nina Shah, as Matt already mentioned. I have been a professional in the engineering and data field for over 2 decades now, I will say. I'm dating myself here a little bit. My career actually started in the United States. So I have been based for 25 years in Silicon Valley in Bay Area. And for the past 2 years, I am now exploring the tech scene in Berlin. I just, in fact, relocated my career, my professional life, and my personal life to Berlin in Germany, where I've been living and currently working as the director of engineering at a healthcare medtech company named AMBOSS.
Awesome. An exciting new step, a new challenge. How does Berlin life and the work life compare to that from the US?
Yeah, that's so I always say this to people that there's always the fantasy, right? So I can say when I was on the other side, I always had this kind of fantasy to live and work in Europe. I wouldn't say Berlin specifically, but living and working in Europe. Because most of my jobs, I've been in very global teams, always had teams all over Europe, Asia, Latin America, and somehow the teams in Europe, whether they were in Germany or in Amsterdam, some of them in Ireland, most of these tech hubs, always found something very interesting. And though I traveled a lot to meet my teams, I had teams traveling over. So there's the fantasy aspect, as I said, it'll be great to live and work. And then there is, I would say, a little bit of the unglamorous side of it also, the reality of living in a place versus going as a tourister or a backpacker or just on a business trip. So those realities in Germany and specifically in Berlin have been kind of interesting to navigate. But I'll say that, for me, this decision came at a time when I was ready to make the move. So I needed no convincing. I was already, in fact, exploring to move away from California, from the US, as a matter of fact. And when the opportunity came along, I evaluated it on the basis of, does this fit my value system? Does this actually fit what I want to do? What's the mission? And so on and so forth. So in that sense, having, being part of a company that actually supports your life, supports your ambitions, supports and respects also your past, where you're coming from, that made the landing quite soft for me. Nice. But other than that, I would say there are some differences, I would say, work culture in general, just, we all know how that can be. One of the biggest ones I'll say is the human aspect, not to say anything about what's the US versus, what I think is, from my experience anyway, is companies invest a lot in culture, in hiring, bringing the best talent together. And then at some point you realize that the system on the whole may or may not support you, so you may have good intentions, but the system may not support you. This I found to be true a little bit in the United States.
Right.
Whereas coming to Germany, it's still the same, right? End of the day, we're all working in tech. We're all passionate about the same things. We've got, for example, companies like Amazon and Uber who are big in the Bay Area, and we have offices all over Europe. So in that sense, there's not much difference, but the fact that the system supports this concept of work-life balance. For me, that was a big game changer. And to be honest, it was a bit of a recalibration for me, given how conditioned I was in the way I worked. It does not mean I don't work hard anymore. It doesn't mean I work less, but it's in how I see work and how I approach it that I found very, very, very different. Yes.
Working smarter as well as harder.
Exactly. Working smarter, working harder, and also working for myself a little bit. The focus is also a bit on myself rather than the job, the company, the team. There's so much about that, which I found it's the conditioning. You're ultimately, we're all, for our own careers, we all have a track record. We're all team players, but you also, in this mix of projects and deadlines and being competitive, being ambitious, in all of that, somehow it's normal to prioritize yourself. And it's very healthy, right? So being encouraged. Sport. Exactly. And being encouraged to do that. Because that was something that, you had to invest a lot. In America, I'm not saying that does not happen, but you really have to consciously invest a lot for companies to prioritize that sort of, you've seen so many job descriptions that talk about work-life balance, and it means so many different things. And that work-life balance, to me, you are part of your own life. So you yourself, you as any individual, needs to invest and say, okay, if this is my work, this is my life, how do I want to balance the two? Nobody else is going to do the balancing act for you. You need to do it yourself. And having the headspace to do it has been quite nice for me.
Yeah, absolutely. We see it in sport. It's a team game, but it's individual ambition, individual hard work. And there's many metaphors about your cup has to be full first before you can share with others. And so many things are so true. And I think the culture in Germany to support this. And
the metaphor you say about the cup being full, I can take it one step forward. I heard this really nice anecdote that talks about, if you spill something, if you have tea in your cup, what you spill is going to be tea. If you have juice, you're going to spill juice. If you have coffee, you're going to spill coffee. So what you carry in yourself, that's what you're going to spill. It's going to come out in your behavior, in your words, in your meetings, in your emails. It's going to come out. And so really investing in what you put within yourself and what you're carrying within you. Yeah. That's what's going to spill out of you. So I find it, and what you said, put your own mask before they say it in every, how many flights have you been on?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a reason why that's the instruction. The safety instruction is literally that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I can speak for Berlin that we are great to have you. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that's very close to your heart, and that's diversity, and in particular, diversity within the world of data. So for those who are exploring or want to know more about this area, what's your definition of diversity?
Yeah, so of course, I can say the dictionary, I pride myself on this topic, right? Where in fact, if you'll see my headline on LinkedIn, I promote myself as a DEI ally and specialist. Company, as I said, companies invest in this, intentions are good. For me, what that means is diversity is having some sort of, different perspectives. It's about different perspectives for me. It isn't necessarily about certain adjectives or characteristics. While those can make up at a very, transactional, at a data level, they're all data people. So from a metadata standpoint, you can say, here is an individual, this is Matt, and Matt has a certain gender and a certain nationality, a certain hobby, a certain education, a certain XYZ. You could have up to 10 billion data points because that's how we want as much information about people as we want these days.
Yeah.
But for me, what I think about diversity, when I think about diversity, you could have a number of people where some of these characteristics or metadata could be almost identical, but they may bring different perspectives due to their life experiences, due to how they navigated their journey, how they came to the point where they are today. For example, I can say, we could have, let's say it's me and maybe another individual who might have almost exactly the same profile, so to speak. So, maybe another on paper, right? Another person who's an immigrant, a person of color, maybe let's even say the gender is identical. Let's throw that into the mix, right? And we say, okay, maybe even nationality. And you may think that by having this person on the team, we've achieved diversity. But you could have two people who are with identical profiles, and it's possible that I may have come to my place of where I am by going to college and studied in, I went to University of Southern California, for example. We had a very good computer science program. I graduated from there, got my master's, did some internships, built my career in the very traditional way, so to speak. And maybe the other person, my doppelganger, on profile doppelganger, might be a person who maybe studied music and then at some point decided that, he or she, well, we will say she because we threw the gender in the mix, decides that I can write code and starts programming and starts to look at data. And at some point, we are now colleagues. It's possible. And in fact, this has happened to me. So how I look at this is diversity for me, it's about bringing perspectives. It's about bringing more stories to the table. That's what it is for me.
So much that can go on, not outside education, outside career, life events, adversity. It's such a variety. So in your experience, what have the benefits been of variety and diversity?
Yeah, and these benefits are exactly that, right? What I said is like when the person has reached the same point as you by following a different path, I think like having that perspective, and then you add that into the conversations, into your meetings, into how you treat people. Maybe there's a cultural impact you can have about this. Maybe there's an impact in how you make product decisions. Maybe there's an impact in how this person might have some opinions on how product market fit should be assessed because their life experiences are different. Now, I'm not saying it's all about that, right? The very first step, I do believe that we have to focus on the basics. If you had everyone with the same profile, and, usually when we say diversity, we tend to think that diversity is a lot about having persons of color, more females, maybe more immigrants, all of the above, LGBTQ, the minority communities. And that does add to the diversity. It's much better than having maybe 10 people on a team, who are exactly maybe friends from college and they started a company and now they're teammates and they're trying to build a system which might, have a global impact. And what does one know about how to make a decision about something that's going to happen in Germany? In fact, I'll give you an example. When Uber says, oh, we're going to launch, we take the Uber model and we're going to launch in a different country. Can you copy the code and customize and localize it? Absolutely, yes. You don't need a person from the other country to come and, come to the team. But when you're promoting that, it is so important to have that perspective of an individual in your target market, because that person knows firsthand what it's like. For example, you could launch Uber in Nigeria, but you forget that, the payment infrastructure might be completely different in a place like that. In America, we're all used to Venmo. Now we have companies like Stripe, for example, to do online payments. You go to a country like India and you say these words, maybe nobody knows what it is. There everybody's maybe using something called Paytm. So as a corporation, this is just a very naive example, I would say. So when you ask me what are the benefits, I would say it goes beyond having a group of people who bring different cultural and interesting backgrounds, but it's about them sharing the experiences that make them who they are. Because when you are in a meeting doing this creative thinking, because what we do in tech, especially with data, we're artists. I say this to people all the time. We are artists, right? There's no coincidence that brain scientists have said it's the same part of your brain that musicians will use. It's the same part that does a lot of mathematical calculations. In fact, music is math also, right? So I don't want, that's besides the point for this talk, but I see ourselves as artists, and with artists and with creativity, I think it's motivating when you see other artists, other forms of art around you. For example, if you're a writer, you become a better writer when you read other authors. You become a better athlete by watching other athletes, whether in your sport or another sport. So for me, it's more about that.
Well, there was that phenomenon of beginner's luck. People thought it was just beginner's luck. It was actually that someone was coming in with a different point of view and doing something differently and succeeding. And we're starting to realize that. In data, how do we educate people? We have on one side single source of truth, and then on the other side we want to educate people about different points of view and variety. What's your experience being there?
Yeah, I can talk about, I can give some simple examples. So for example, I worked in let's say a social media company. I used to work at Reddit, for example, and you have Reddit is very common. Everybody likes to use Reddit. And we have rich data, there's conversations. What's the beauty of Reddit is the conversation data is rich because it's the experts on that particular topic who are writing on the subreddits. We have moderators. There's a whole system to do that. Now, how to educate? Now, in a company, if we're going to, let's say, make a decision, we all say we're going to be data-driven decision makers. We're going to make a decision. We may maybe put out a survey. Let's just walk through the use case, and we put a survey, we can collect some information, and then we have certain interpretations of what these responses mean, that, if 10% of people answer this way, then this is maybe the sentiment. We have a way of maybe doing some sentiment analysis based on survey responses. Whereas my point of education comes from the fact that the sentiment analysis does not actually account for the fact that me giving a response versus you giving the response, the context might be different. At a transactional level, it's a simple answer, right? It's either a rating or it's a multiple choice question. So I'm keeping also this conversation a bit more on how data is structured, right? We have all these different ways of doing it. But if I say, I'm giving this a rating of 4 and you say you're giving it a 3, why? What is it, right? Because your definition of your experience is yours and mine is mine. And that level of education can come when you start looking at this data together, and when you see the skewed, so what I see when I've done any of these kinds of data analysis, you have the two extremes, right? Where it's very clear. There's the 0 ratings, for example. We'll just go with the rating example, which means this particular topic, we just don't do well, because universally, regardless of who these people are, most people are saying this is not good. It sucks, basically. Or you have really good. Okay, great. It's the in-between, because you don't know. How can something be so polarized, right? Like if you have a question and you have an equal percentage of people answering on both sides of the spectrum, then I think it gives you information to say, we rather than asking this question, we need to dig deeper and see, why is this the case? And it gives really good inputs to the powers to be, to the leaders within the organization, to say, we're not doing something right here, which is why we are getting inconsistent answers. And it would actually be a shame if we took those answers and used it to make a decision. Even if you had very clear majority, when you look at the data, and if you did your, let's say, your demographic analysis, if you said, most companies will do it like this, right? You make a survey, you say, most females are answering in a certain way, whereas people in a certain level and above are answering a certain way. So this immediately gives you some very good information about the culture to say that, as a company, we are very diverse, but the experience of people who are, let's say, junior to mid-level is a little bit different than the experience of people who are, let's say, first-time managers versus senior leadership. And somehow you can see it in the data. And that level of education, I do believe that, when companies invest in positions like they have diversity officers, we are doing a lot. In fact, the field of HR tech, people analytics has evolved so much in the last decade. And yes, there are a handful of companies that are more popular, I would say. Culture Amp, Peakon, there are all these companies that actually take these survey results and they mishmash, and they have their AI algorithms which can give you action items to work on. But we ought to challenge all of that in a way that says, there is the obvious things that these software is telling us, but are these algorithms biased in a particular way? Because maybe they're only taking into consideration the sentiment analysis based on however the modeling of that algorithm was done by a certain group of people, and we don't know who those people were. So that level of education, I think with time, it'll come. I do believe that what we're doing is much better than what it was, right? Before, previously, there was nothing. At least now there is a level of awareness that we need to invest in this area. And therefore, what I do when I go work at places is I tend to partner very closely with the people leaders, sharing, giving inputs. I'm personally not, it's not a career goal or an ambition to become an HR leader, but I'm interested in the topic of the analytics of people, because that's where the whole diversity topic really can highlight I would say the pros, the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows of it.
So strip bare, it's diversity of thought, diversity of experience, and diversity of point of view. That's what we're trying to achieve. Yes.
And also sometimes it helps you to go against the grain, the status quo. So for example, I see so many times, we write these job descriptions, and we want to hire, let's say, a senior software engineer or a senior data engineer. And we want a certain skill, you want the tech skills, you want the personality skills, you want certain project management skills, right? But many times, if you have a system that is maybe, let's say, doing the first round of shortlisting of the resumes, like the candidate pipeline, I have seen that as a human also, the tendency, when we used to do it manually, when we didn't have the machines doing it for us, we would tend to give a lower priority to names that were difficult to pronounce. Like there's data that talks about, so if a name was very difficult, people just didn't bother. Or if you didn't go to a certain college, or rather it's the other way around. When they saw certain colleges on the resume, on the education section, immediately it went to the top of the pile. It's like, oh, this, wow. And so then as these systems became automated, these biases became part of the automated system, the process. The machine started thinking exactly how we were thinking. So at some level, the education, the path that you bring about, how do we educate people about this, is coming from a place of self-awareness. How aware are we of our biases? I can give you a very personal example. You introduced me as Nina Shah. Nina Shah. About 23 years ago, I took on the professional name of Nina. You know why? Because my legal name was just very difficult to pronounce. It was very, so my name is Nandini, which for me, it sounds really nice. It's 3 syllables. But somehow, during interview calls, the focus was so much about how to pronounce the name versus, and so I decided, I'm going to keep my personal and professional identity a little bit different. And I'm not saying that everything went well. In fact, I'm proud of the heritage. I use my legal name everywhere, but it's sort of like a writer having a pen name. So I kind of took that approach, so I don't want to offend anyone who, believes very firmly on, hey, you must keep your name. But these things are real, where when humans think like that, when we design systems to do the work of humans, those systems will carry some of the biases. And so the education should be about doing a gut check, a reality check on your own bias. There are many biases that are just unconscious. So that's the education piece. And we used to do, I've worked at companies where we did unconscious bias training for people managers to begin with. We would always do it for people managers, because when you're hiring, you tend to sort of hire people who are a little bit like you, or as I said, all these different things. You went to a certain college, so you immediately assume that this person might be an awesome engineer. And then what we realized is that this kind of training should be done across the board, because this bias also can creep in how we all work together. It can creep in when we are in a team meeting. It can creep in when we are trying to, sit on a customer call and stuff like that. And for me, when I see things like that, when I'm observing, I try to, be the person who breaks the cycle, So if I'm on a call and let's say, person A is saying something, it doesn't matter what the gender of the person is, but if person B, let's say, comes in and kind of just starts taking over the conversation, and this happens all the time. And it will mostly happen with women, but that's why I said, let's keep it gender agnostic, because we're talking about diversity here. I tend to always interrupt those kinds of interactions. And I'll say, hey, person B, I'm really interested to hear what person A was saying. Could I just listen to that and then let's get to you? Yeah. So all of us with that level of awareness, if we just keep each other real, because no one's doing it intentionally, it's our conditioning. So you assume good intent, right? So that's the thing. So the person who's interrupting is most of the time does not have malice, but it's just how they're conditioned. But then that's not a great experience for the person who's getting interrupted all the time.
No.
So these are just, I'm giving examples of how I see these things in my day-to-day interactions. And sometimes it's like, you have to be the one who's going to, break the mold, right? And so if you do these subtle things, you also send the example. Like when I do a subtle thing like this, somebody who's in that meeting might watch and say, oh, Nina said that, and it was quite okay. And maybe someone else who's thinking about it might next time feel empowered to say something like that. So it's a little bit of both. Awareness for me, the awareness is definitely the starting point.
Do you think it's a case of impatience and maybe laziness that we look for immediate associations and immediate indicators of what we think would make a good employee or a good team member, as opposed to listening about their experiences and their thoughts? Is that an issue?
I don't think it's impatience. I think sometimes it's just the stress and the pressure of hiring fast. This is where what you asked me, the very first question you asked me, what's the difference between and again, I'm no expert to comment, but my experience working in American or companies based in the US versus right now I'm working at a company that's a German company. There's something to be said about, the pause before a word comes out of your mouth. So I don't think in most cases it's about, like I said, there's no malice. It's the pressure. You have to do more for less. You have to do more really fast. And more for less means it could be for less money, for less time, for less quality, whatever it may be. We're always wanting to do more because we measure success in output. We measure success in productivity, not in efficiency, So there's a little bit of, and that when companies, if leadership, senior leadership, let's say the C levels or even, senior leadership, if they consciously aligned and made a promise to say that, we can compromise on these two things. For the most part, we still keep our business goals, but in a couple of areas, if we can make some small compromises, perhaps we are investing towards a more inclusive culture. And let me also say, inclusivity doesn't just mean, invite them to a meeting. I can tell you how many times I've been invited to meetings and been told also that, hey, we included you. And I say, yes, you invited me to the meeting, but you didn't listen to me. That's not inclusivity. Right? So it's like, be authentic about what you're doing and be really committed to it.
Yeah.
So that's also something, so I would say self-awareness first, like let's check in, see where our own unconscious biases are coming from. And then if we happen to have a good group of senior leadership who really very deeply cares about this, they will put the bottom line of the business is always the most important thing. I understand that.
Yeah.
But they will give enough preference to this topic if they're truly authentic about it. I believe that. So it does come in, the value system of senior leadership. And, at the end of the day, it's a business, it's competition, ambition. We want to be fast. It's the race, who's going to get the product out there first. But all that can be done with very subtle, small changes. Like I say, invite someone to a meeting, but just listen to them.
Yeah.
Listen to them.
I was going to say there's going to be people listening to this and thinking about how they can improve and how the environment and situation and what they can do. Listening and taking a moment to listen is one. What other takeaways? How can you improve quite quickly in your way of thinking to support diversity? What are the easy first steps?
Self-education. I said self-awareness, that's going to come with education, right? The easiest mode of education is talk to your people. I spend, I would say, about 40 to 50% of my time. I have a team of 70 plus engineers. Even in the past, I've led a lot of big teams. And I invest 100% of my attention when I am talking face-to-face, even if it's on a video call like this.
Yeah.
Listen to your people, because you will get a better pulse check than any survey will ever give you. I can tell you this. So listening is, again, the key. That's the first step to education. And that then gives you all these subtle things, can also give you reflection. So after this, then self-reflection. Reflect and see what could have been done different. What could have, changed. And it takes a lot of courage. I will say that, like I've made mistakes also in the past by, misjudging. Like, they say, don't judge a book by its cover. But I've judged many books by their covers. I've done that in my younger career. And I am pretty sure I've been judged by the cover I'm in, right? And that cover for me is my gender, my immigrant status, my being a person of color. All of that is my cover, right? And I'm sure I've been judged. But I have also done the same, unknowingly, unintentionally. But the self-reflection came, and as I got higher up in my career, I made a very conscious choice to continue working, right? Because you reach a certain point in your career where it's kind of like, you want to make impact. You're always craving for more impact, more senior positions. And I craved all of that. I still crave it very much. But for me, I want to be in a position where I can be connected with my people. I don't want to, I want to have autonomy in how I treat my people. That's something that's super important to me because I know I can influence at that level. And for them, I'm the person who's advocating for them. And it's, I would say, the single most important reason besides, my career and all of that. It's one of the big main reasons why I'm still, I have the motivation and the energy to do the work after 25, 30 years, at some point, I feel like I just want to take a vacation and not think about all this, but what keeps me going is my mentees, the people who I mentor, and seeing subtle changes in them. And so what I feel at this point in my career also is my way of continuing this conversation is to keep excelling at what I do, and in the process, hopefully create the next generation of leaders who will have the self-awareness, who will have the courage and ability to reflect and then listen to their people, and then not just listen, do something about it, break the status quo. So my hope is to just invest in the next generation. This is me paying it forward, because I know I've lost many opportunities. I know all the other topics, which are very big topics, inequality, and but the bottom line of it all is it is about diversity. And therefore I take pride, as I say, I pride myself in saying I'm an ally, first of all, but even besides being an ally, I am an active contributor in this field, at least in the limited scope of where I have an opportunity to do this. I may not be able to, be a full-on activist and change. I may not be able to make government policy. It's okay. I'm realistic. But if I can have an impact with the people I come in contact with, that is motivating to me. I remember somebody said this, that generally, when all is said and done, when we all at some point we're going to retire, and as we reflect back on our careers, not one person is going to remember what you said to them. Maybe you had an argument at a meeting. No one's going to remember any of it. What they're going to remember is how they treated you. And that's what I try to focus on.
Oh, it's a credit to you. I think our sight is such a powerful sense, but it's great. Well, it's to think to have the courage to get past that and maybe use other senses like listening, and the butterfly effect, I think, is something that comes to mind, that your small actions can affect one or two people or more, and that can make an even bigger effect in the future. It's a big credit to you, Nina.
Yeah, thanks for giving me an opportunity to share some of these tidbits. As I say, I can go on and on some of the topics that sometimes can feel a bit heavier, and I also don't want to sugarcoat anything. The reality is that we are not including diverse people. In fact, I'd like to share something, quite recently in Berlin, we had a former US President Obama was in town for a talk event. And I happened to be one of the lucky ones who was able to score a ticket, and I went and watched. And in his talk, he said something very interesting about how he made sure so the moderator asked him a question about how did you ensure, your staff, his presidential staff was very diverse. He had people from different ages, different genders, religions, nationalities, well, of course all American, but coming from different backgrounds. And they asked him, and he said, it's kind of like there's all these people who sit around the table, and then there are the people who stand behind them, because they're the ones taking notes. The people sitting at the table are the ones making decisions and policy. They're having conversations on policy. And what President Obama would do every now and then would be, somebody would be talking, and then he would randomly maybe point at maybe a young intern who is standing in the room taking notes and say, hey, you so-and-so, what do you think about what this person is saying? And he would do it in such subtle, casual ways that it created also a safe environment for people to, when someone at that level, so I'm not saying you have to always be the president, but even in your own limited capacity, if you are a manager, if you are a leader in your company, if you promote the sort of, the underdogs, or the ones who are generally not speaking, you normalize it in a way. You create a psychologically safe environment for people to speak their mind, because there may be people who have an opinion on what's being discussed, but sometimes are just shy. So, or they feel that it's not my place to say it when I have, 3 senior engineers, I'm just a junior engineer. Why should I say something? But as a leader, if you notice that the balance in speaking is concentrated, among maybe a handful of individuals. It's okay to every once in a while call out and encourage people to give their opinion. Some people may not want to speak because, they may be introverts or whatever it is, but ultimately there are so many layers and nuances to this. So coming back to that original thing, like, what does diversity mean? It's not a very simple thing like saying it's the combination of 5 or 6 profile values. That's how we sometimes look at that. I've been in countless meetings. I've seen many company presentations also, and case studies where companies publish their diversity portfolios and talks a lot about the ratio, gender, nationality, all of that. But then the experience of the people, if that was a real diverse company, each individual should feel a sense of belonging. But when you talk to the individual, when you talk to people on the ground floor, at the ground level, their experience is very different from what we publish in the fancy journals. And that's where we need some commitment from senior leadership to do it. And that's kind of what I try to do by example, because as I said, in my limited capacity for however long I'm going to be working, if I can make that difference to create that next generation of leaders who care about these things, that'll keep me motivated for many years to come.
Absolutely. Education and awareness. I mean, great takeaways. And unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for your rich insights and your time today.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. And as I said, anytime, I'm always available, even to people who are listening. We'll stay in touch, can get in contact with me. I'm very passionate about this topic. And I thank you, Matt, for recognizing that and inviting me to your podcast.
No, it's our pleasure. And a note to the listeners, I think there's going to be more to come. You mentioned some articles and some events. So do keep your eyes peeled and we'll share those as well.
All right.
To the listeners, don't forget to like and share this podcast as well so we can reach as many people as possible. But it is bye from us. Thanks once again, Nina.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Ciao for now.
Ciao. See ya.